Trina, we saw lots of great ideas this week in the course on the assessment of learning, on kind of making the dark matter of student learning more visible. And I think it's important to reflect on a couple of different uses of that. One is to provide feedback to students on their learning, right? So they understand kind of where they need to improve and what they need to work on. But another key piece of that is to provide us as the instructors with information we can use to improve our teaching over time. That's based on what our students are actually learning or not learning. And that's really the idea behind teaching as research, one of the Cirtle Network's core ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with teaching as research, Trina?
Teaching as research is really important to me as an instructor, and that's because when I first arrived on campus at the University of Wisconsin in Madison as a freshly minted PhD student, I taught my first course. I totally crashed and burned. It was a terrible experience for me as an instructor and probably not very good for my students either. My students definitely didn't learn what I set out for them to get out of the course. And it was after that I realized that I had never had any formal instruction in teaching. I had gone through my training as a PhD student, but never had a course like this one. And when I realized that as an assistant professor, I went and found a course that was taught at UW-Madison by the Delta program. And a lot of the core concepts in that have translated into the material that we've developed for this MOOC and for many of the other courses that Cirtle offers. And so the course that I took was one about instructional materials development. And I went into that course with a pretty firm and clear idea of the kind of learning activities that I wanted to design for my students that would address some of these misconceptions and challenges that they had with learning the content that I wanted them to learn. And very quickly, the instructors told me to slow down and back up a little bit and engage in something that we call teaching as research, which is to develop a hypothesis about the problems that we think that the students are having with their learning, and develop some formative assessments to measure that. And then to develop materials and learning objectives and materials that will allow us to assess whether or not the students are meeting our learning goals. And it was this process that I went through in a very formalized way that totally illuminated to me how the learning process works and how to do this whole backwards design process. And it was this continuous improvement in teaching as research that really got me excited about teaching and applying the principles of research to in the classroom. So that was a really amazing experience for me.
Oh, that's a great story, Trina. And it highlights one of the reasons we put together this course, which is to provide that type of experience for more graduate students and faculty as they enter the classroom. We're going to continue next week the backwards design process. We've talked about learning objectives, we've talked about assessment of learning, so we'll move on to phase 3, which is designing learning activities for our students. And we'll really focus on the idea of active learning and what that means. What does it actually look like in the classroom? What are its key components? What kind of choices do we have when we're designing those learning experiences for our students? So it should be a lot of fun and a lot of good ideas. We'll see you then.